Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to the Niche Cast. We're from the niche-cast.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sporting matters. We got the Blackcaps versus England first test preview. We got the Plunket Shield updates. We got the HBJ Shield updates. We got all the Kiwi footballing stuff that you can handle. And I was curious to see that despite you saying that this is a bad, not, you didn't say it was a bad season, but you said it was a bit of a dip for Auckland City, and yet here they are in the National League finals against Birkenhead United. So like a mediocre season for Auckland City is making the National League finals with like 17-year-old phenom and Stipe Jukic and all the other stuff that goes with Auckland City FC football. So like we will talk a lot of football later on in the show, but I'm curious, like, how did Auckland City FC get into the National League final when you're saying it's a down season?
Well, it's a down season because they almost didn't get to the National League Grand Final. They lost with last-minute goals conceded in consecutive weeks at home against Western Springs and Wellington Phoenix a couple of weeks ago. So losing two games in a row for Auckland City is automatically a bit of a freaky one. To do it in a way where it's like they blew it not being able to control the game at the end, which is something they're normally so good at, that's also pretty freaky. And then the fact that both those two defeats were at home at Kiwi-NRL Street, even more freaky. But then, of course, Auckland City being Auckland City, when they needed a last-minute goal against Napier City Rovers last week, they got one. When they needed a win against Coastal Spirit in the final round, knowing that just a win in general would see them through, thanks to that Napier City win, they not only got one, they got one very comfortably. They got one off the back of Maya Bevan scoring a 151-second hat-trick. It was like 19th to 21st minute. 151 seconds between the first goal hit in the back of the net and his third goal hit in the back of the net. It was crazy. And that is what Auckland City does. Fortunately / unfortunately, depending on which side you're looking at, they just they find a way. And they did this a lot through the winter season as well. Like they would have these wobbles. They've lost Cam Howison to Auckland FC. They've lost Liam Gillian to Auckland FC. They've had to bring in a few different players along the way, like bringing them in mid-season. That's always going to take a little bit of adjustment. Plus, guys like Jerson Lagos, Kalen Gould, they're not necessarily the obvious Auckland City pass it to death type of players. Like those are two very direct, run at them kind of guys. Stipe Jukic also falls in that category as a youth team player who's come through there. So, a little bit different look for Auckland City. I actually kind of love it. I think they've needed a bit more of that variety for a long time. But yeah, it hasn't necessarily been the flawless control, just winning 2-0 every week that we've seen from them in the past. They got challenged, but in getting challenged, they rose to the challenge and overcame the challenge and going back to another National League Grand Final. So it is a down year for them, but their version of a down year is finishing second instead of finishing first and still making the final and possibly still winning.
And still producing some of the best Kiwi footballers in Aotearoa. However, their fellow finalists, Birkenhead United, they're a bit new to this level. Not the National League level, but the competing with Auckland City. Because the last few years, off the top of my head, we've had Wellington Olympic have been the team that's kind of joined Auckland City at the top of the domestic footballing ranks. And I'm just connecting dots here because I've seen Birkenhead rise in recent years. And then I'm watching the Wellington Phoenix and I'm watching Corbin Piper do a fantastic job at right back as part of I love this young group of Wellington Phoenix footballers that we've got there. And Corbin Piper was someone who stood out to me, not quite as much as Isaac Hughes. About the same as Nathan Walker. You did tell me that Nathan Walker's got very quick feet and he's a very lively attacking player. And that was evident for the Wellington Phoenix in their win on the weekend. But Corbin Piper coming out of Birkenhead United, going down to the Wellington Phoenix, and he was very impressive, playing like a right back. And I think that was when they went to the back four. So, am I correct in my knowledge of domestic football that Corbin Piper came from Birkenhead United and then went down to the Wellington Phoenix?
Yeah, he did. He played for Birkenhead the last time they were in the National League. I think that was 2 years ago. And then last year they didn't make the National League and he was away playing football in Ireland. And then he came back this year. And Birkenhead was a big presence in Birkenhead qualifying for the National League, playing kind of as an attacking midfielder, by the way. That's more his known position. When he signed with the Phoenix, they decided they wanted to convert him into a centre back, and he played I think 3 of the first 4 games for the reserves, and then after that he was going so well at centre back. It's like, well, you don't need to play any more reserve team football. So David Ball ended up playing more reserve team games than Corbin Piper did this season. Corbin Piper's just been hanging around the first team. Yeah, got to go at right back on the weekend, which is different, but it's not any more different than a midfielder turning into a centre back, turning into a right back. Like, he's got the skill set to be able to do those things. And midfielder to right back is not an uncommon, let's get you into the first team picture and here's a position you might be able to do a job in kind of role. We've actually seen that already with Matt Sheridan with the Phoenix, who used to be he was converted into a right back with the reserve team. So it wasn't like he got to the first team and they were doing this, but he was a midfielder before that. So yeah, Corbin Piper is a fantastic player, and I love the way he goes about it. I think he's super strong. He's a great athlete. He's very good in the air and he's very good with his feet. He does score goals, but he scored goals more as an attacking midfielder. Now he's just flawlessly converted himself into a defensive player and is doing that fantastically. So sweet as. But also Birkenhead United, yeah, they've been in national leagues before. They've not been they're not like a traditional powerhouse club necessarily, but over the last 10 years, they've been one of the better teams for sure. They won the 2016 and 2018 Chatham Cup finals, so they've got a bit of top end pedigree about them, but very different team. So I did actually look up their 2018 Chatham Cup final, which was against Western Suburbs. So it was right before Western Suburbs. Those guys all went and played, like the All A Academy guys all went and played for Eastern Suburbs and won the National League. So you had like Nando Pinecker and Matt Garbett and Marko Stamanic and guys like this, very young versions of them, because this is 2018, but they were playing for Western Suburbs in that Chatham Cup final. I think the only player left for Burko is Luke Jorgensen, their midfielder. So near complete turnover for them since then, but like they lost their best player to the Wellington Phoenix, and then finished first in the National League and made to make the National League Grand Final. So that's been an incredible journey from them as well. So yeah, looking forward to a couple of good National League finals on Sunday afternoon. That one is.
Who's in the women's final?
The women's final is Auckland United versus Waterside Karori, and these two teams fit in very clearly to a couple of those trends that we talk about with a lot of sports, where it's like in a league where there are a lot of very young players, a lot of sort of developmental ideas going on across many of the women's National League teams. Auckland United and Waterside Karori are probably the 2 oldest teams. And they're the 2 teams with the most sort of ex-professional experience in there. With Auckland United, you got Chloe Knight, you got Saskia Vosper, ex-Phoenix players. You also got a couple of really good sort of imports there. Hannah Mitchell, their goalkeeper. Kaylee Ward is a striker who's been around the national scene for quite a while, but is American. Yuma Harashima in midfield. So really solid base there. Some talented young players coming through. Charlotte Roach has had a breakthrough season up front for them, scoring goals. And in Waterside Karori, you got a few sort of like well-known, been around the traps kind of thing, domestic Kiwi players like Sarah Morton, Renee Bacon type players. You've also got some very good, just especially for them, really good imports. Nikki Furukawa, I think Canadian winger, and then a bunch of Americans. Kendall Pollock scoring all their goals up front. Emma Starr in midfield has played professionally in a bunch of countries in Europe. I think most notably she had a little stint with Crystal Palace in the second tier of the English stuff. I couldn't find out how many games she played or however that went, but I know she played a lot in Ireland as well before that. She's borderline been the MVP of the whole league. Creative midfield player who's been scoring goals and setting up goals and winning the ball, passing it around, all this stuff. So you've got, yeah, the two veteran teams with the most international presence have been the two best teams. It kind of stacks up. It makes sense when you look at that. But the, the two best teams are the two best teams, no matter how you go about building those squads. Then they have both been undefeated leading into the grand final. I think they're undefeated. Haven't watched Waterside Karori's game from this week yet, but yeah, that's a matchup that was decided a week in advance. Those two teams, I won't say cruise through, but they were clearly like there was them and then there was distance between third, fourth, fifth kind of thing. And for Auckland United, that's especially good because they won the Kate Shepherd Cup final. They won the NRFL Premiership. They won the Oceania Champions League. They've already won 3 trophies this season. They're going for a 4th trophy, which would be winning everything, which I think Auckland City men did do a couple years ago. They had a season where they won the quadruple. But Auckland United, they're undefeated. So they've got 1 game left to try to complete a quadruple and to go an entire calendar year undefeated. Pretty crazy. But yeah, if anyone's going to stop them, Waterside Karori are probably the best set up team to be able to do that. So we'll see what happens on Sunday there as well.
Beauty. We may preview those National League finals in greater depth, as well as this coming weekend's A-League fixtures, where we've got Wellington Phoenix bye, we've got Auckland FC versus Newcastle Jets. That is a home game for Auckland FC, and we've got Wellington Phoenix women. They are at home, at the home of Aotearoa Football, Porirua Park, where they face the Brisbane Roar. So we're going to be previewing all the A-League games, some National League finals, and we've got Plunket Shield cricket starting on Thursday, as well as the Blackcaps versus England. So we'll definitely be touching on any last-minute Blackcaps versus England first test ideas, but also checking in with the teams selected for this round of Plunket Shield, all of which we will be discussing on Thursday in our bonus podcast, which is strictly available for the folks on Patreon and anyone with a paid Substack subscription. Bonus podcast every week for the generous folks helping us out, helping us cover Aotearoa sport to the best of our ability. You know where you can find all that shenanigan stuff on Patreon and on Substack. We also do our Monday and Friday newsletter via Substack, which is completely free. So check that out if you hadn't already. And any other links you need is all here, however you're getting your podcast. So check those out. And of course, we appreciate anyone who is offering their assistance, but also offering your eardrums and your eyeballs, just being here with us as we go deep into Aotearoa sport, which is what we love to do, and it's what we're here to do. It's all we're here to do. But we get a bit of mindfulness to up the ante, let's say. We've already got the juices flowing. Let's up the ante with a bit of mindfulness. What do you got, Chief?
Rightio. Well, Gladiator 2's in theatres, so I thought I'd go with some Marcus Aurelius here, where old mate in obviously from Meditations, here we have a quote that goes, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been harmed." Harm reduction from Marcus Aurelius.
It's some very stoic insights there, which is just, it goes back to your personal power. Like, the power of the individual is how they perceive the world and the word, and any other insights that I can offer there through my mindfulness, because I am not Marcus Aurelius. I am the Aotearoa hermit. Let's go the Aotearoa sage. Let's go with the Aotearoa sage. But shout out to Marcus Aurelius, and shout out to you for offering that mindfulness this week. There was no NBL basketball by the looks of it in the Australian NBL, but we did have Tall Blacks basketball. They had a win over Chinese Taipei last night, and a win over what was the first game? Did they have
No,
a first
they
game?
lost to Philippines in the first game. It was the first time they've ever been defeated by Philippines. It was a little bit of a freaky game, kind of let it get away in the third quarter, at a fourth quarter comeback that fell up a little bit short. But yeah, that was a frisky one in Judd Flevel's first game in charge, but also a completely non-consequential one because they then beat Chinese Taipei and Christchurch, and they've already qualified now for the Asia Cup. Must be next year. There's no room for an Asia Cup this year, so it must be next year. You know, that's how it goes. So they had the cool thing about having the Tall Blacks in the Asia Confederation, because Oceania has just kind of been swallowed up into the Asia Confederation of basketball, is that there are now, it seems, a whole lot more games and a lot more tournaments to either be qualifying for or playing in with these Asia Cups for Tall Blacks, for Tall Ferns, for the junior grades of both sides. It just feels like there's a lot more international basketball than there used to be, which means that there will be situations like this where you get a frisky one and you lose to the Philippines away. The Philippines are pretty good. They got a lot of naturalized citizens in there, so there's some very talented players in that team, and that was probably inevitable that a side like that would be able to beat us at some point now that we're playing them a lot more. But it also means you get these Tall Blacks tours where it's like, we don't have to pick our full strength team. We can mix it up a little bit. We can chuck in some debutants. We can allow the guys who've got little niggles from the NBL not to have to play during their international break and stuff like this. So I think we got a fair bit of that. But yeah, as I say, it was also Judd Flavel's first tour in charge of the Tall Blacks. So it was the beginning of a new era.
Smells a lot like the All Whites as well, just playing games in front of local fans, connection to the basketball community around Aotearoa. It's not like all the football or the rugby league or the basketball. It's not like all of that's just been playing in Auckland, as it quite often has. They're getting around Aotearoa and building that connection throughout the land. I did see Oscar Goodman was part of the squad, and you wanted to talk about the youngsters in the Tall Black squad. Who else impressed or made a mark for you along with Goodman? Maybe not the performances, but just being there, playing for the Tall Blacks and stepping up to the international level.
Yeah, because performance-wise against Chinese Taipei, it actually was kind of bad until until the fourth quarter where they pulled away. Like, they found that other gear when they needed it. They managed to hit some shots, sweet as. But they spread it around a bit. So I think Sam Wardenberg would have been the pick. 16 points, 13 rebounds, 6 assists. Big stuff from him, even though he did miss a few shots, only 6 of 15 from the field. And the game kind of changed when Shea took over as point guard and just started like dictating things and midway through the second half. So a bit of the usual suspects there. Hiram Harris had a nice game. But yeah, there was a debut in there for Oscar Goodman. There was a debut in there for Kaya Isaac. There was a debut in there right near the end for Kata Hopoi as well. Kata Hopoi and Shea weren't actually part of the squad that played in the Philippines. They were called up because Max Darling got injured and Sam Menenga got injured. So coincidentally, the 2 Breakers players in the squad withdrew ahead of the game that was being played in New Zealand, which I'm sure is like nothing behind that, but there is a little symbolic thing of the 2 New Zealanders from the Breakers not playing in the game where we're talking about the Tall Blacks playing at home and connecting with Kiwi basketball culture and fans and whatnot. So it might be something accidentally aligning in there. But yeah, Kata Hopoi was called up. Shea was called up, played awesome. Kata Hopoi pulled up and just played the last couple minutes. If you haven't heard of Kata Hopoi, he, along with Oscar Goodman, was part of the under-17 World Cup squad earlier this year that did absolutely fantastic there. And that particular FIBA event, Oscar Goodman was the superstar from that team. He's already signed to go to, I think it's Michigan State University or Michigan University. I get confused because sometimes, I don't know, it's the Americans, whatever. But that's a big school. That's a Division I school. He's going to go there. He's going to get some serious development, serious opportunities. And this is right after a guy who's only a year older than him, Julius Halaifanua, is also going over to I think he's going to Georgetown or something like that. Anyway, he's also got a big college opportunity coming up. The stacks of Kiwi College players at the moment are pretty fantastic. And yeah, that under 17 World Cup team, which made it to the semi-finals, the only other Kiwi basketball team that's ever made the semi-finals of a FIBA World Cup event before was obviously the Tall Blacks way back when in 2002. And there were a couple of sons from Tall Blacks and from the 2002 Tall Blacks in that under 17 World Cup. One of them being Hayden Jones, son of Phil Jones, who had already made a Tall Blacks debut earlier in the year when it must have been earlier in Asia Cup qualifying, probably come to think of it. So definitely an eye for the future with these kind of things. This isn't saying that these guys right now are good enough to be selected ahead of the best players currently available. This is sort of, like I was saying, is a little bit of a we don't need to pick everybody kind of squad, and therefore they've held a little bit of space in there for a couple of youngsters through a lot of these squads. Halafano also got a debut earlier. He wasn't part of that under 17 World Cup squad because he's slightly older, but he's definitely part of that next generation of Kiwi basketballers coming through brigade. In fact, he's probably the guy flying the flag, leading the charge of that whole brigade. So yeah, 3 members from that under 17 World Cup squad have already debuted for the national team, and this is before they've even had a chance to turn 18. You know, there's definitely a little bit of an eye on the future there with Oscar Goodman, with Hayden Jones, with Kara Hopoi, and with Julius Halifano earlier in the year as well. So these are names that people got to know, basically.
And to build that out a bit further, Julius Halifano is from Auckland, but in keeping with the Aotearoa sporting growth and excellence, Hayden Jones, son of Phil Jones, so he's from Nelson. Oscar Goodman is from New Plymouth, I believe. And Kara Hopoi, as you alluded to, that's the first time I've heard about him. He's from Tauranga Mount Maunganui College. So 3 of the best young basketballers from Aotearoa are from Bay of Plenty, Taranaki, and Tasman. Marlborough. I think it's Marlborough, yeah. So shout out to basketball. Like, basketball is throughout Aotearoa. I don't think that's anything new though, like, because obviously Phil Jones came from Nelson as well, and Judd Flavel, he's from Canterbury, I believe, and of course Canterbury. I'm going to Google that just to make sure. And of course,
yeah, I'm not sure because he's coached a few different regions. Judd Flavel, he's been coaching Canterbury most recently, led them to a couple of NBL championships in a row. But yeah, I'm not sure where he's from.
Yes, neither am I. And I forgot my point. Basketball was really popular and really good around Aotearoa, so shout out to basketball doing its thing. I was about to say Canterbury, obviously back-to-back NBL champions, so it goes without saying that basketball is quite good in the regions of Aotearoa. Righto, let's get into the best cricketing nation in the world playing a test of cricket in Christchurch. That is the best cricketing nation in the world, who have gone 1-4 in their last 5 tests against England, and it's the best cricketing nation in the world that has gone 1-2 in the last 3 tests at Hagley Oval. So shout out to the Blackcaps Test cricket team. Also shout out to Snehith Reddy. Let me get his full name because it's a banger of a full name. Snehith Reddy Devareddy. I did see he's otherwise known as Lucky Reddy. Because he's also a 17-year-old and he's scored a lot of runs in the warm-up game for the New Zealand. Let's go with New Zealand 11. Like, we don't tend to get political here at the Niche Cage, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. The New Zealand 11 that played a warm-up game against England. And Snehith Reddy scored 60 runs in the first innings when no other New Zealand batter. And this team, this New Zealand 11, obviously not selected by a bald, middle-aged, half Pākehā, half Palangi man of the New Zealand Elderly Crip Party. Let's go with that one. This team, obviously not selected by that man, is made up of players who aren't playing domestic cricket. So it's like all the guys deep in the depth chart of the respective Plunket Shield teams. Snehith Reddy's from Hamilton. He plays for Northern Districts. He scored 60 runs in the first innings when no other Kiwi batter scored over 20 runs. Second innings was a bit better for the Kiwi batters, and Reddy finished 33 not out. This is interesting, I reckon, because Reddy earned a Northern Districts contract as a 17-year-old, and he was also the only Kiwi batter to score a century at the Under-19 World Cup earlier this year, I believe. Only 2 Kiwi batters scored a 50, and they both came against Nepal. Oscar Jackson from Wellington was the other, scored a 50 in that game. Reddy scored a century. So, like, yeah, Nepal's pretty good at cricket, actually, so it's not like to diminish the achievement of scoring a big old century at an Under-19 World Cup. But after that, he earned a contract for Northern Districts. After that, he, in my opinion, was the best batter for the New Zealand 11 against the touring England team. So stash that away, because he seems like a good young cricketer. In this warm-up game, England scored at 5.5 RPO in the first innings and then 8.9 RPO in the second innings. So they were doing what England does. But in both innings, first innings they were all out, and second innings they lost 9 wickets in a run chase that I don't think was an actual run chase, because they fell a few runs short, but they still had a wicket in hand. So obviously it was just typical warm-up cricket things. So aside from learning a little bit about some Kiwi cricketers in this game, learned a bit more about England, just having a whack, that's what they do. But also not necessarily a dominant performance from England, considering they lost 19 wickets while also scoring quickly. And yes, Reddy was the only Kiwi batter to put up a score in the first innings, but you had Jamal Todd from Otago scoring 49, Hunter Kinley from Otago scoring 56, Troy Johnson from Wellington, he scored 80. Jesse Tashkoff from Wellington scored 56 in the second innings. So far from a dominant performance from England, but as I'm learning, like, I don't really want to come to any grand conclusions about a warm-up game, nor do I want to forecast how a game of Test cricket is going to play out, because recent Test results have just baffled my mind. Obviously, I'm talking about New Zealand. That's all. The only cricket team I talk about is New Zealand, and them going to India and beating India 3-0 in India just blew my mind. So I can't really figure out Test cricket right now, but I can predict that England are going to come out and have a whack, because, let's be honest, it's blatantly obvious that that's what they're going to do. And also with England, you've got a situation where Jordan Cox, apparently the only specialist wicketkeeper in their squad, he got injured, so he's not going to be playing. I think Jeetan Patel, must still have a bit of COVID because my words are all over the show. Got that long vid. But maybe Jeetan Patel just injured Jordan Cox with the throwdowns or something like that. So good stuff there, all the Kiwis involved in England cricket. So they lost their starting wicketkeeper, in England also have Rian Ahmed leggy, Shoaib Bashir offie, and Jack Leach left arm offie for a Test series in New Zealand. So England are coming to Aotearoa, and they're playing. Did all 3 spinners bowl in this warm-up game? We had Leach, Bashir, and yeah, it was just a bit of Leach, a bit of Bashir. They didn't bowl a whole lot, to be honest. But if you're selecting 3 spinners in your squad, seems like England are going to select a specialist spinner in their first 11 for the Test at Hagley Oval. And that is Hagley Oval, where it's going to seam, it's going to swing, and runs are going to be scored, although I have seen a lot of English people talking about flat pitches in New Zealand.
So have I. I saw that as well. And I didn't believe it. Like, I don't. I get that they play flat a little bit. Like I think the standard New Zealand pitch will swing around a bit on day one and then flatten out as it goes along. But like that's how all cricket pitches react, unless they either flatten out or they break up. I wouldn't have thought that to be the defining aspect of Kiwi cricket conditions, though. I would have thought surely it's the seam movement that's going to catch you out rather than the flatness and the good batting conditions kind of thing. I think that might be wishful thinking from England because a flat wicket is kind of their perfect conditions because they can just go after it with the bat, right? Which we saw when they were in Pakistan, right? Like they had that game where they conceded 500 in the first innings and then got a 200 plus run lead and went on and won that test match. And then afterwards, Pakistan made sure that there was nothing nearly that flat again for the rest of the series. And did Pakistan end up winning that series? I can't remember.
Maybe. I only watched the best cricket team in the world.
Yeah, same.
Sosaia,
So we don't have time for these the pretenders out there.
Yeah, it's like best cricket team in the world and Plunket Shield.
And then other Test cricket nations if there's time, which there isn't because there's so much good Plunket Shield.
No. It's
Blackcaps
best
Test
cricket team in the world, Plunket Shield, HBJ Shield.
True, and then chuck in a little bit of Ford Trophy and Super Smash, and then
Yeah.
at some point,
So yeah, I don't like. Yes, runs are scored at Hagley. Like we had Chad Bowe scored a double century at Hagley this summer. I think that was in the Ford Trophy. Canterbury played a Plunket Shield game there as well. Jeet Raval scored a lot of runs. So, and batters do score a lot of runs in Christchurch. Like it does get better for batting, but I would like maybe Napier's a bit flat. Hamilton can get a bit flat, but those are like the flattest pitches and conditions you'll find in New Zealand. Yeah, and this is my idea about the test. I think New Zealand need it to be as nibbly as possible, especially if, as it looks like, they are going to select Nathan Smith as part of a four-pronged, shout out to the prongs, a four-headed seam bowling beast, Tim Southee. Now, let me get this clear. Tim Southee's out of form, but Tim Southee also averages 22.6 at Hagley Oval. So I think he's going to be there. I think he's in the team, even though everyone wants him out of the team. So you're going to have Tim Southee, you're going to have Matt Henry, you're going to have Will O'Rourke, and I think you're going to have Nathan Smith. You kind of got to select Nathan Smith because he's a good batter. And he's also a dominant seam swing bowler in New Zealand. Jacob Duffy was second to Nathan Smith for Plunket Shield wickets last summer. So he deserves to be there. But if we're selecting Glenn Phillips as the all-rounder, the main all-rounder, and we want to have as nibblier conditions as possible, those nibbly conditions are going to benefit Nathan Smith, but Nathan Smith also adds some pretty decent batting alongside Matt Henry. Like, I'm really looking forward to you're not going to have it in order, but because it goes Glenn Phillips, Tom Blundell, Nathan Smith, Matt Henry, but Phillips, Smith, Henry is going to be a very fun batting trio. How are you feeling about the team selection, possible debut for Nathan Smith?
Well, oops, forgot to press the button. Well, I was thinking about the last time England came here when I think they were playing, those were late summer test matches as well, eh? So, which I think was, Neil Wagner had that one where he got the last wicket and we won by a couple of runs or something. It was a split series, but there was a very, famous test match in the second one. Pretty sure those were late summer test matches. So, first of all, I think that might play into why England are thinking the decks are flatter here than they actually are, because here they're playing 3 or 4 months earlier than what those ones would have been, when there will still be a bit of the old winter juice in the wickets. But because of that, I mean, I know we just had a great series of spin in India, but I think this is definitely the time to go back to the old four-pronged, what do we call it? The four-prong, um, with the seam attack. Like that just stacks up. Nathan Smith coming in, trying to be the new Colin de Grandhomme, sweet as. We can now do this with Glenn Phillips and Rachin Ravindra still giving spin options um, within the, what do you call it, within the 11 without having to sacrifice a bowler or anything like that. I think it's sort of one of those ones where it picks itself with one exception. The one exception is what do you do with Will Young? And I kind of think maybe the thing you do with Will Young is you don't play him, which I know sounds pretty rough because he's just got player of the series in India and he's been scoring runs in all formats for the last couple of months and looking fantastic. But you're not picking him ahead of Kane Williamson. If you're asking him to open instead of someone like Devon Conway, then you're asking him to bat in a different role to what he's been successful at recently, which maybe you want to do, but that's also that's not a straight swap. You're moving Will Young around to do that, which would also be the same if you picked him instead of like I don't know, Daryl Mitchell maybe at 5 or something. There's not really anyone else who's droppable except maybe Tom Blundell, in which case you'd have to get the gloves to Conway, which I guess you could do if you wanted to go down that path. The thing is, Tom Blundell and especially Daryl Mitchell have fantastic records batting against England. When we went to England and got thrashed there not that long ago, those two were holding the whole thing, the whole batting lineup together with the runs they were scoring. So I think the simplest solution is the one that people aren't necessarily considering. The question is, how do you get Will Young into the team? And I think the answer might just be you don't. Like, unless someone gets injured, I'm not sure that you do.
And that's all right. You know, you've only
Yeah,
got
it's
11
fine.
players, and New Zealand is pretty good at cricket. So you're going to have players that are good enough to be in the team, but won't be in the team. And it's Kane Williamson at the end of the day. So you got to give some, like, if anyone deserves to come straight back into the team, it is Kane Williamson. But also now there is pressure on other batters to perform. So yes, Will Young might miss out the first test. Whoa, crikey Jack, yeah, Daryl Mitchell's pretty good against England. But you better score some runs. Because if you don't score runs, Will Young's right there. And that's to the benefit of Kiwi cricket. I will push back again. I've said it before. I'm surprised that you referenced Nathan Smith as Colin de Grandhomme because Glenn Phillips is Colin de
I saw the
Grandhomme.
look on your face when I said
Crikey.
that. I was like, I only meant that as a fourth seam bowling option, but he is more he he's certainly not the same type of batter, and I think he's probably the more skilled seam bowler as well. He's someone who's pushing to be selected in the actual front line sort of same things. But I
And
meant that very loosely. But yes, I
yeah,
see I see what you're saying.
and like it's not like Glenn Phillips is just a first 11 cricketer right now. That's what it is. Forget about what he does, although what he does is very important when we're considering he's the best fielder in the team. He whacks the ball and he bowls pretty good off spin. Regardless of his skill set, he's a first 11 cricketer. So whatever conditions you're showing up to play in, he's there. And then you build around that. And the fact that New Zealand can have 2 spinners and 4 frontline seamers, that's pretty cool. And all are right arm seamers, right? You got Tim Southee, classical right arm swing. Matt Henry, seam. Will O'Rourke, freak. But he also moves the ball in the opposite direction of Southee with his swing and the swing that Nathan Smith has. So he's got his bounce, he smashes hands, he bowls massive hoop and in-swingers, and he nibbles the ball all over the show. Nathan Smith, as we saw in Sri Lanka, he bowls 137 to 139. He might hit 140, I reckon, in Christchurch, because he was given it a nudge in Sri Lanka, and he bowls like he is a faster Tim Southee. He's got the sharp swing, but I think he's also got the ability to nibble the ball back into the right-handers as well. So they're all right arm seam. But we've got O'Rourke, who if I think Nathan Smith can hit 140 Ks, I reckon Will O'Rourke can hit 145. So we've got Southey nudging 130. We got Matt Henry in the mid 130s. We got Nathan Smith nudging 140. We got Will O'Rourke nudging 145. They're all different heights. They all move the ball. Like, this isn't a plain Jane group of right arm seamers for New Zealand. And it's also important to note, like, Nathan Smith is here because Kyle Jamison's injured. Ben Sears is injured. So we're like, yes, Nathan Smith did seem destined to play Test cricket this summer. But last summer it was Ben Sears getting a debut. And we've still got Kyle Jamison averaging 17.5 at Hagley Oval, the very flat Christchurch pitch where Kyle Jamison is an absolute nightmare. Who is the best New Zealand spinner to bowl at Hagley Oval?
Who have we played there recently? You said we've lost a couple of our recent test matches. One of those would have been against Australia, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, there's been Australia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, England, Sri Lanka, India, South Africa, Australia. We played a lot of teams. Who's the best spinner?
So this is all time. This isn't from the current squad, you mean? In which case,
Forever.
The obvious answer is probably just Daniel Vittori then?
I don't think he bowled at Hagley because Hagley's a new...
Oh, he would, yeah, would have, yeah, he wouldn't have necessarily got to play there very much. In which case, it's not Ajaz Patel. 0 wickets in New Zealand conditions. I know that's true. Maybe it's just... Oh, but you're saying over time. So maybe it's something freaky, like it'll be Mark Craig or something. If it's not him, I was going to guess Mitchell Santner, but...
Mark Craig's actually... He might be the worst.
Okay. I mean, yeah, okay, sure, but...
Technically, 3 deliveries from Luturu Taylor for 1 wicket is top of the pops.
Of course, legendary. How could I forget? The last 3 deliveries of his career, too.
For bowlers who have bowled more than half an over, it is Kane Williamson. He's got 2 wickets and an average of 17, 3 RPO. And then you've got Michael Bracewell's got 1 wicket, 44. Craig has 1 wicket at 88. Glenn Phillips has 1 wicket at 41. And then you've got Taylor's got 1 wicket. Todd Astle, 4 overs, no wickets. Ajaz Patel, 12 overs, no wickets. So no frontline spinner for New Zealand has more than 1 wicket at Hagley Oval.
Kind of a spinner's graveyard. Although have you got like non-New Zealand numbers there? I might look that up because I imagine a lot of traveling teams are more likely to pick at least like the standard, we have a spinner in our 11 kind of lineups, where at least then if you're bowling in bad spinning conditions, you still get to bowl to New Zealand batters who aren't that good at playing spins. So there's at least a balancing act there. Because there is that trend about how New Zealand spinners don't tend to take very many wickets here, which is why we don't often pick frontline spinners in home tests anymore. But the very best in the world traveling spinners have still been able to take wickets in these conditions. Not so much the also-rans, but the best of the best definitely have been able to when they've turned up here. So I might look that up and just check.
Well, we've got Nathan Lyon. He's averaging 26 with the ball, 6 wickets at 26. Maharaj for South Africa's got 4 wickets at 30. Shakib Al Hassan's got 4 wickets at 19. So there are a few decent spinners there. But another point is that Canterbury usually have 2 spinners in their team when they're playing in Christchurch. Because they got Ripon and Cole McConchie. And if Ish Sodi's available, sometimes he replaces a Ripon. Sometimes they might go Ripon and Sodi, but usually they will go with Sodi ahead of Ripon. So you're always guaranteed 2 spinners in the Canterbury team across the formats. Obviously, when it goes white ball, they might go Ripon, Sodi, and McConchy. But it is an interesting point. And the reason Glenn Phillips is so useful is now New Zealand just has a spinner all the time. They don't have to select a spinner or not select a spinner. You just always have a spinner because he's a first 11 cricketer. And I think that changes the selection dynamic, where it's like, okay, do we need a spinner? How do we get a spinner in? Who are we taking out? Now it's just like, well, Glenn Phillips is just there. And if he's not going to bowl any overs, you know that Glenn Phillips is going to help the team as a fielder. You know that he is capable of scoring tough runs as well as giving it a CDG whack, because Glenn Phillips does have a first-class batting average of 40.5 with a strike rate of 67. So but what you're saying about the foreign spinners, that does kind of align with what England have done. So if England have read the situation correctly, they've seen Nathan Lyon was successful at Hagley Oval, so obviously Shoaib Bashir is going to be successful. But it is also interesting that depending on what they do and how many spinners they actually select, whether it's one specialist spinner, that will be a specialist spinner more than New Zealand. So I think either way, it's going to be a very interesting dynamic of how these two teams build out their respective first 11s.
Yeah, kind of crazy to look at those stats though and see that the top wickets are visiting players. So you get down to, as you said, Kane Williamson with his 2 wickets at 17s, 11 overs bowled across 10 test matches at the venue. So that's doesn't tell anything, because we already know that Kane Williamson just doesn't bowl anymore. He hasn't bowled for a long time. That's fair enough. The variety is helpful, and it's probably one of those things where it's not like the Blackcaps never wanted to have a spin bowler. It's just that they more wanted to have a fourth seamer who's more likely to take wickets. It's a luxury that they can now afford because of Glenn Phillips, because of how good Glenn Phillips is. He's in there as a top 7 batter, and he can bowl, and he can bowl. He can bowl quite. He's really developed quite a few different angles to his bowling now. It's not necessarily like he's got the change-ups or anything like that, the variations, but he can bowl to contain runs. He can bowl to attack. He can bowl to give it a bit of a rip with his off spinner, or he can bowl to just kind of put it in a spot. Like he's been through enough different situations in Test cricket, enough different conditions, that he's got the versatility, at least in that manner, through the experience that he's gained. Glenn Phillips does have a Test match fifer. He got one against, well, he's got a couple, doesn't he? But he got one in particular at home against Australia last summer. You probably got to go back to Daniel Vittori to find a Blackcaps spinner who's taken a fifer in home conditions. That's very rare. The versatility that offers the Blackcaps when it comes to their selection is massive, let alone the fact that Rachin Ravindra can roll the arm over as well. So you could have spin from both ends. Like if you needed it, if something crazy happened and the wicket just dried out or actually got that flat somehow, as flat as imagined, then you've got that option too. Like they tried for a very long time, I think, to try and manufacture an all-rounder, like someone to play in that 7 spot for a while. It was Colin de Gronholm. He was great, but he performed the role of a spinner, but he's not a spinner. So you still just had the seam bowling lineup, but like Ravinder himself spent some time there, Michael Bracewell and Mitchell Santner and these guys where it's like they're not necessarily picking the best spinner, they're picking the best batter who can spin. But because Glenn Phillips is actually a good enough batter to be in the team on virtue of his batting and can spin, like it's problem solved. And they're just, I don't, if, otherwise, I don't know that we would still be seeing Nathan Smith playing at a Hagley Oval type thing, but it gives a lot more freedom to how they want to construct an 11, which wasn't necessarily there in the past. So this is, I don't know, it's almost like cheating to have a genuine all-rounder. And I'd say he is nudging towards genuine all-rounder status at this point. He's batting all-rounder, but still, like to have someone who can do that in your team is almost like being able to pick 12 players in a lineup, it's like a cheat code. And the best teams have often in Test cricket had someone like that. We haven't for quite a long time, but at the moment they kind of do, and it's a I don't know, it's a blessing. It's a very helpful thing to be able to put together a test squad with an all-rounder in place. It just makes all these other questions a lot easier to answer.
Again, I've got to stand up for G Philly because you said he's nudging genuine all-rounder status. They don't get any more genuine all-roundery than the one and only Glenn Phillips. Like,
What's his bowling average at?
He is an all-rounder in the truest sense of the word. In a word, term, phrase. Like, he is the best fielder in the team. He's one of the best bowlers in the team. He's one of the best batters in the team. Like, it doesn't get any more all-rounder, first 11 certified, kind of Chris Cairns, who are some other legendary Kiwi all-rounders. Daniel Vettori.
Vettori's second half of his career. I think some people would say Hadley. I think Hadley wasn't necessary. I don't think his batting average was up in the thing, but he did have his test century. I don't know, did Jacob Oram count? Maybe he wasn't as successful of a test bowler as he was a test batsman or as a one-day bowler. But Ross Taylor, yeah.
So Glenn Phillips bowling in tests, he averages 27.3, which is kind of better than any other spinner for New Zealand aside from Ajaz Patel. And he's got a very respectable first-class bowling average of 35.3. Very respectable considering most of your favourite spinners in New Zealand first-class cricket average around 40. Now, here's a bit of trivia for you, because we're going to get it again. You listen to anyone, and to be honest, I imagine some Kiwis are going to say it. Glenn Phillips, former wicketkeeper, he's so amazing because he only started bowling spin after he was a wicketkeeper. When did Glenn Phillips start bowling in first-class cricket?
I would imagine that Glenn Phillips started bowling spin pretty much as soon as he started playing first-class cricket. I don't remember him. Like, I know he was a wicketkeeper then by reputation, but it's not like he was ever the frontline wicketkeeper at any point. So I imagine he had plenty of opportunities to bowl, even if it was just a cheeky little over here or there before he really, harnessed the muscles there. But I really think he was bowling spin fairly quickly into his first-class career.
Glenn Phillips made his first-class debut March 2017, and he bowled his first overs of first-class cricket in the 2016-2017 season.
So basically straight away.
In his first-class season, let me rectify this. In his first-class debut, Glenn Phillips bowled 2 overs for 1 run. Let's see what he did in the second innings. He only bowled once. So his teammates in the bowling lineup, Lockie Ferguson, Donovan Grobler, Colin Munro, Mitchell McClenaghan, Taran Nathula, Glenn Phillips, Sean Solier. So if you're hearing Glenn Phillips, the wicketkeeper who only started bowling spin in recent years, Glenn Phillips literally bowled in his first class debut in 2017. That's crazy. So shout out Glenn Phillips. He's been doing it. He's been building towards this moment where he is the best New Zealand spinner ever. Shout out to Daniel Vittori and shout out to anyone else in the history books that I have forgotten there.
Shout out to the ghost of Clary Grimmett, you know?
Yep, shout out to that guy. This is something that I'll say with my chest. I think Glenn Phillips is underrated. The way he's talked about, what he does, he is my favourite Test cricketer for New Zealand right now. I think he is... Yeah, sure, Kane Williamson's the best. Yeah, sure, Matt Henry's taken lots of wickets. But to me, Glenn Phillips is the best player in the Test team. And I'm saying that half jokingly, but also I need to go above and beyond with my hot take to put Glenn Phillips on that pedestal because I think it's pretty legit. And I don't think he is talked about in that way. So shout out to Glenn Phillips. And shout out to anyone riding with Glenn Phillips. Obviously, look a wee bit silly if he doesn't make the first 11 for this first test. But
I find it hard to imagine he wouldn't. But it's, as you said, he just feels like a locked on first 11 player now. And because he's got the different angles to his game, like there's no reason not to pick him, especially because of how his spin bowling all-rounder aspect does free you up to pick that extra seamer. So the idea of like the reason you might not pick him is to be able to pick another bowler, but then his presence allows you to pick another bowler anyway without having to drop him, if that makes sense. So, you know, I think there's underratedness is just because he hasn't had a big score at the bat yet. When he gets that first test 100, which hopefully will come this series, I think that nails it in because his batting average is almost like less impressive than his bowling average. 27.36 with the ball, with a 4 and a 5 for 30 wickets at this point, bowled in 16 different innings. So this is it's still a small sample size, but it's getting towards a medium sample size. You know, it's getting up there versus, you know, 33.94 batting average, which is like, I think the bowling average might be a little bit inflated because of the more favorable conditions he's bowled in, but also I think the batting average is deflated because he's been playing in a lot of, you know, that not a lot of runs were scored in that test series in India, for example. So I think the bowling average will boost up, which is fine because Daniel Vittori had a career average of like 35, 36 and probably our best Blackcaps spinner. Well, if that's the benchmark, then Glenn Phillips can easily settle in as someone averaging 32, 33, and that is really, really good for a Kiwi spinner. But if that batting average is also above 40, then we're looking at something pretty fantastic. Right now, the batting average isn't, but he, you know, like even last summer when, you know, home conditions, that's normally when you'd expect the Blackcaps batters to maybe cash in a bit more. Well, Australia came here. You know, it's not easy to score runs against those guys at the best of times, and that probably wasn't the best of times given how the Blackcaps performed through that series. So
I think we're going to be waiting for that big score a while more because he bats 7, right? Like he's not going to just score a century batting 7. But the thing about Glenn Phillips is he is a genuine batter who can bat with the guys ahead of him, but then he can transition into batting with the tail. And this is what makes him so useful batting in the role he is. Like, there's like this, there's a bit of a rush to get him up the order maybe. But the thing about Glenn Phillips is he is a genuine batter who can craft out a long innings. And say he's batting with Tom Latham, Kane Williamson, Devon Conway. Yes, he can score a century, but it's going to be very difficult for that to happen. It's a situation that is going to set that up. But if Glenn Phillips is coming to the crease later on in the innings, he will attack. And that is what you need to do down the order. And there's going to be a lot of Bazball rhetoric, a lot of Bazball discussions. And I started this conversation referencing how quickly England was scoring. Matt Henry has a whack. Glenn Phillips can have a whack. Like Nathan Smith is a very good batter in all formats, but he can up the ante. So now you've got, like, the reason Glenn Phillips to me is Colin de Grandhomme is because Colin de Grandhomme could knuckle down a wee bit, but he was probably just going to smash boundaries. Glenn Phillips is a better batter than Colin de Grandhomme, but he does the same thing. He can craft out an innings, but he can also up the ante down the order. And when you've got bowlers who are very aggressive down the order, I think it changes the dynamic of your team. It's not like people want Tim Southee to knuckle down. No. I want Tim Southee to smash sixes. I want Matt Henry to whack boundaries. That's what I want to see. And I think they can do a better job of that than England. England, Stokes, Brooke, Zach Crawley, Joe Root, like Ben Duckett, all those dudes are going to score very quickly. Whereas the Blackcaps are the opposite, right? Like, I think their top order is going to be quite solid. They're going to play a Kiwi style of cricket. But then as you get down the order, they're going to have a whack, right? And I've got a lot more confidence in the Blackcaps' lower order scoring quickly than England's lower order scoring quickly. There is the kind of the most awkward situation for the Blackcaps batting unit is Tom Blundell averaging 14, which is less than Matt Henry in the World Test Championship. And Daryl Mitchell's averaging 29.3 in the Test Championship, which is well below his Test batting average of 44.9. So he's dropping, but series by series, because he's not scoring as many runs as he once did. Highest Test averages for New Zealand against England. Shout out to Charles Stewie Dempster, because he averaged 88.4 in 8 tests against England. Then we got Daryl Mitchell, 74.1. Then we got Tommy Blundell, 68.4. So, like, the weakest batters in the Blackcaps team right now are the best New Zealand batters against England, aside from Stewie Dempster.
Aside from Stewie Dempster, that's an important asterisk. I do know as well from memory that Kane Williamson actually has quite a bad record against England. I think he's only averaging in the low 30-ishes against them. I'm sure he's still on that list somewhere.
36.8.
36.8 with a couple of centuries. So, like, he's scored centuries against everyone. So, yeah, there you go. He's had some big innings, but he's also had, I think he's been chipped out a little bit early. But I would imagine a lot of that is coming against Broad and Anderson, which, frankly, is no longer a thing he has to worry about. He's outlived them in a Test cricket perspective.
Blundell's obviously not in great form, but he did score a 50 in Sri Lanka. He had a 60 in the first test. He did score a 63 in the Plunket Shield just gone as well, but his 41 in the second test. So he had 5 innings, 4 of them were single digits. Sure, that's not great, but some of these batters did score just 150 in the series. It's not like everyone was dominating. Rachin Ravindra had a good start. He wasn't fantastic in the next 2 tests, and so on. Tom Blundell's 41 came in the second innings when Tom Latham hit an 86. Glenn Phillips was 48 not out. Tom Blundell was the only other batter to score 40 plus. So, yes, he doesn't have a lot of runs. I'm not here to say that Tom Blundell is not out of form. He is out of form. He is batting to maintain his spot in the first 11 as the best wicketkeeper batter in Aotearoa. If your alternative is Devon Conway wicketkeeping, don't do that. Like, we can have it. There are specialist wicketkeepers around. Might as well just have Fennell in the team as the wicketkeeper. Tom Blundell did
Can Will
have,
Young wicket keep?
yeah, well, at a skill set. Maybe Glenn Phillips stops bowling and goes back to being a wicketkeeper. Maybe that's
It
the.
keeps from what if Devon Conway keeps from one end and Phillips keeps from the other end? So you can have Phillips bowling at one end and then keeping at the other end, you know? He's like take the true all-rounder status even further and have him doing 4 skill sets in one game.
If there's one bloke who can do it, it is the one and only G. Philly. My point here is that Tom Blundell did have one all-right score in India. And it was a score that added to a Blackcaps win. Like, it helped his team win. Because only 3 batters scored 40 plus in that innings. And that took the Blackcaps to a target of 359. So it helped his team. Tom Blundell also, as I said, scored 63 in the Plunket Shield just last week, or a few weeks ago. He finished last summer's Plunket Shield with a century. So it's very convoluted, it's very complicated, very complex with his England stuff, his averaging 14 in the Test Championship, how he scored his runs, what he's done in the Plunket Shield. Goes without saying, it's going to be an interesting series for Tom Blundell. We will be talking more about this series on Thursday. Do you have any leftover thoughts that we haven't touched on yet?
I guess not. Um, Other than a little bit of Tim Southee's stat watch, but I haven't got that in front of me. But I do know he is nearing on 100 sixes. I was thinking about that when you're talking about the sluggers, and like this series in a way is like it's also a farewell because it's Tim Southee's last Test series, unless we make the World Test Championship, which even then that's not a series. This is his last, and it won't be in New Zealand. So this is his farewell to Kiwi conditions in Test match cricket, which has been his best format, but also he's been good in all the formats, and he's been absolutely elite at various times in the formats, which is a funny part about his career, is how he's sort of like alternated between his best one being one, then the other, then the other. So it is a bit of a, you know, it's a farewell. It's an honouring of Tim Southee in this series, and he has a couple of little cheeky milestones. If he can get 15 wickets to get to 400, that would be amazing. If he can just keep his bowling average under 30, that would also be amazing. I don't think it'd be very fair if it went over. I do remember once upon a time, in fact, it would have been Tim Southee's first series, come to think of it, when Stephen Fleming's last series was against England, and he had to get like 250 plus scores or something like that, or 100 runs in the match to keep his average above 40, which he did he just got there, and he ended up 40.02 or something like that. So there's precedent. That was the very start of Tim Southee's career, and now the very end, he might be trying to do the same thing, keep that bowling average under 30. And yes, a couple more sixes will make him, I think it's the 4th player, might be 5th player all time to get 100 sixes in Test match cricket. I know Ben Stokes as well out in front. Brendan McCullum's done it, and Adam Gilchrist has done it. I can't remember if there was a 4th one. There's at least one more player ahead of Southee, but not with 100. So I can't. Yeah, whatever it is, big milestone there as well for someone who, especially if you look at that list of the most the most sixes in Test match cricket in history. It's like legendary batter, legendary batter, legendary batter, Tim Southee, legendary batter, legendary batter. Like, he's keeping some amazing company as part of that crew. So hopefully he can nudge that a little bit further as well.
However, Tim Southee's batting hasn't been good enough in Test cricket.
No, it's been a disappointment throughout his whole career, even though he's one of the best 6-hitters of all time.
We will talk a lot more Plunket Shield, I reckon, on Thursday in our bonus podcast available on Patreon and Substack. I would like to update Rhys Mariu's first-class batting average, which is now a whopping 62.46 after 9 tests. 3 centuries, including a double century, 4 50s. And obviously this comes on the back of his 240 against for Canterbury in the Plunket Shield. He also got a cheeky 8 not out in the second innings, so I imagine that's propelling that first-class batting average up over 60. Leading run scorers in the Plunket Shield: Nick Kelly, Jet Raval, Rhys Mariu, Dane Cleaver, Logan Van Beek. Max Chu is the only one with 3 50s in the Plunket Shield at the moment, though. Nick Kelly's got 2 centuries in that last round. Everyone else, like, they've got a century, they've got a 50, whatever. Max Chu, the wicketkeeper for Otago, is the only batter with 3 50s. So shout out to him. And we've got leading wicket takers, Scott Kugelheim, Liam Dudding. Just quickly, Liam Dudding's first-class bowling average is now 22.8. So shout out to Liam Dudding. Moved down from CD down to Wellington. Then we got Dunru Ferns, Brett Hampton, Jordan Sussex, Jared Mackay, Sean Sosaia, Travis Muller. So to our point about spin bowling, all these dudes are seamers. Will O'Rourke did take a 5-5 for Canterbury in the most recent round as well. And of course, I talked about Kane Williamson's 60 batting for Northern District. So I think Southey played for Northern, took a couple wickets. I think that's it. Will O'Rourke and Kane Williamson as well. It's important to note as well that the HBJ Shield, there was no games played last weekend, so they'll come back this weekend. Of course, we got Plunket Shield on Thursday, as with the Blackcaps on Thursday. So lots of domestic cricket coming at you. We also had a triple whammy of A-League fixtures, all of which were 1-0 wins, I believe. And I also believe that the Wellington Phoenix women was the best win, because they needed the win the most. They got off the bottom of the A-League ladder, so shout out to them. First win of the season, big up. The way I was thinking about framing these 2 wins in the men's A-League is, which team has had or displayed or showed or just had the best Kiwi contributions, the most interesting Kiwi contributions. And obviously Auckland FC, they got Alex Paulson in goal, so that's great. You've also got Nando Pinaka, as you said before, very good central defender. You got Gillian and Rogerson on the 2 flanks. I thought they were pretty cool as well. But I can't go past the Wellington Phoenix and the contributions of their Kiwis, especially because their Kiwis are younger and they're on the rise, aside from Costa Barbarouses and what he was able to do, then joined by Marco Rojas to set up the goal. And it was, the way that game played out was very interesting as someone who's still building up my football repertoire, because Costa Barbarouses was kind of a lone trooper up the top of the formation in the first half, and then I think he went to the left, more of a midfieldy type of role, but still pushing forward in the second half. So that was great to see. I thought Costa Barbarouses was the best player on the field for the Phoenix. Obviously, Alex Rufer does his thing, but what I loved about this win for the Wellington Phoenix, and as far as ranking these 3 wins go, I think the Wellington Phoenix women needed the win the most. So their win was first for most impressive. Then Wellington Phoenix men second, then Auckland FC third. No disrespect here. I'm just ranking 3 very good wins for that put Kiwi football in the spotlight once again, dominating the A-League. But the way the Wellington Phoenix men dealt with adversity, because you had Oscar Van Haddam playing right wing back in the first half, and to the best of my knowledge, he isn't necessarily first, second, third choice starting right back for the Wellington Phoenix, but he had a solid effort. He gave it his all, but you could see that he wasn't quite pushing upfield, but he had a crack. And then you had Nathan Walker, who I think he might have started in the same role on the left. He was like a left wing back, but then he started to get further and further up the field, especially when they changed the formation, moving into the second half. You mentioned Sheridan, and we've got Isaac Hughes in the center of defense as well. I just thought all those dudes put in big shifts, big efforts. Who came on at, yeah, then it was Corbin Piper coming on to replace Oscar Van Hadden. Like, that was far from his full strength Wellington Phoenix team, but the contributions of the young Kiwis, I thought, elevated them. And shout out to Olawayemi. He's improved a lot in over the past few weeks. So want to big up Olawayemi, his saves, his distribution. Sure, he's not Alex Paulson, but he's doing a pretty damn good job of plugging that hole. And what he does as the starting goalkeeper. The most impressive to me was Isaac Hughes. He is physically, and the way I think you can tell a good football defense by how they control the ball when it goes over the back line. And there was one instance where Isaac Hughes, as soon as he realized the ball was going out, or was at least going close to the back line, which was like 6 meters out from the back line, he just starts shielding the ball. And he just shielded the ball perfectly to earn his team a goal kick. And all those fine details are crystal clear with the Wellington Phoenix, especially in those younger players, because they have now been entrenched in the Chiefy system, the Chiefy way of coaching and playing football. All these coaches that we're talking about here are bloody impressive. Chiefy's impressive. Corica is impressive. Paul Temple's quite impressive as well.
Steve Corica, yeah.
But the details when you're watching Hughes, the details when you're watching Piper. Van Hadden was buggered after 10 minutes, so I wasn't really tapped into his details. You got Nathan Walker, who was very lively on the left, and it's all led by someone like Costa Barbarousse, someone like Alex Rufa. But yeah, I don't know if you got any other examples of stuff that like Hughes was doing. I thought Sheridan was classy in that role as well. Like, these are young footballers who look comfortable at this level, but also tough conditions. Like, the pitch was a bit iffy. It was stinking hot. Like, that was adversity for the Wellington Phoenix. They're down on troops. They're over in Australia for a home game. Tough conditions. Gritty game. But those dudes all executed their role, and they were pretty stoic. How about that? They were stoic in defense. And talking around it, Hughes was my favorite player from the weekend in all three of those games. But it was a very impressive effort from the young Wellington Phoenix team in a tough spot.
Yeah, Isaac Hughes has impressed me so much throughout the whole season. I don't think he's had anything even close. I don't think he's had anything worse than a great game so far this season. Like, even in the Auckland FC loss, I think he was one of the better next players. And because remember, that game was just that was the game I predicted it would be 0-0, and then for like 80 minutes it just felt like a 0-0, and then all of a sudden there was the Olawayemi mistake, and then Auckland FC scored another one as the Phoenix had to gamble on trying to find an equalizer. That's how those ones often go. But for most of that game, that was a solid 0-0 kind of performance, and that just adds to what the Vixip are doing here as well. Like, they've only conceded like Auckland FC, 4 clean sheets in a row. Alex Paulson, 4 clean sheets in a row, plus 3 clean sheets for the All Whites in the same span of time. Just, yeah. 7 senior games in a row without conceding a goal. I worked it out in the newsletter. He is up to, and of course this is not including the Olympics, because that's under 23s, and I'll specify that when I throw out the stat as I keep tracking it. But I know that's convenient, but also that is, literally speaking, we're talking about senior football here, and that's what it is. 648 minutes without conceding a goal in senior football for club and country. You could actually add another 45 minutes on that if you wanted to count the A-League All-Stars game, but given the status of the Newcastle team that they played against, I don't think that counts as senior football either. So I'm not going to. 648 minutes since Alex Paulson last conceded a goal. Their defense has been spectacular. Like, Nando Peineke has been so good for them. Dan Hall, I thought, was absolutely brilliant on the weekend. Like, the way they defended was spectacular. And that was what won them that game. I know Guillermo Mai got that goal and they were able to hang on. But, like, second half against MacArthur, Auckland FC were I won't say clinging on, but the reason they weren't clinging on is because of how good and well organized and combative and aggressive and proactive their defense was. Things that it's quite a bit in common there with what the Wellington Phoenix did last year as a defensive team. But also, because that's getting such a spotlight, it's easy to overlook the fact that the Wellington Phoenix, who everyone reasonably thought, for correct reasons, this is completely understandable. I was one of them. I was saying in preseason, I think they need to get better in attack because they're not going to be able to be as good in defense. I'm not sure if they're as good in defense without Finn Sermon or Alex Paulson, but the fact that they're as close to what they did last season as they are, they've kept 3 clean sheets in 5 games. They've only conceded 3 goals. 2 of them were late against Auckland FC. So against the Aussie teams, they've only conceded once in 360 minutes themselves. That's kind of crazy. And I won't say the main reason for it is Isaac Hughes, but he's the main reason why they haven't regressed nearly as much as maybe predicted. And Hughes, because he's been able to come in and do a lot of the same stuff that Finn Sermon did. Not all of the same stuff that Finn Sermon did. I don't think Isaac Hughes is anywhere near as good of a header of the football, whereas Sermon would just like launch into those things and you put the ball in the air, he wins that thing 9 times out of 10. Hughes is a lot more like get up and challenge it for it, but he can be beaten in those situations. However, he's better on the ball than Finn Sermon. Like he's better at passing out from the back. He's better at picking midfielders and just making accurate, good decisions there. Both of them, I don't think we got to see a whole lot of it from Finn Sermon because he never actually scored for Wellington Phoenix. He had that one goal that should have been his goal that was turned into an own goal scandalously, but Isaac Hughes definitely popped up with a few goals for the reserves during his time. And those two actually spent a lot of time playing together as the centre-back partnership for the reserves over previous years. And Hughes, I think, is a year or two older, or at least was like an established first-team player before Sermon was. And when Sermon got the elevation to the first team, like that made sense because he was the player who had the higher upside, but he wasn't necessarily as consistent as Hughes. And so, I was a little worried there that Hughes might fall through the cracks. And then he gets a contract last year, senior contract. But surprisingly, this is when we were learning that actually the Phoenix are just going to give all those fringe contracts to their best academy players. Like this is the new structure of the club. Okay. Hughes was one of the early beneficiaries of that, but he played a few times last season. He mostly in back threes, so because Sermon wouldn't have started every game, it wasn't like he was coming in for either of them at any point. But he would pop up as the left-sided centre back a few times. Sometimes it was Albie Kelly-Heald, but when they went with that switch, he was there. Little bit more of a but can he do this week in, week out? Can he be can he do it in a back four, which we've seen them alternate between a 3 and a 4, even within the game on the weekend they did that. Hughes has been flawless. Like the stuff he does so far, it's great. Like I say, not as good in the air, but he's just as good at hurling, or just as brave at hurling himself in front of shots. And he's good tackler. He's very composed at the back there. He was actually a captain for quite a while of the reserve team, so he's got those, the personality, the leadership credentials. I just think he's had an outstanding season so far, and he was. Yeah, okay. I'll rephrase what I was saying about the main difference or whatever. I think he was the main variable in terms of if they're going to be able to get close to what they did last season as a defensive unit, because they replaced Alex Paulson with an import, right? So at least if they were pulling out stops there, they were going for the best possible goalkeeper they could find. Tim Payne's still there. Sam Sutton's going to be healthier this year. If anything, he missed the game of the weekend with an injury, but if anything, he should have a better season than he did before. Scott Wooden, actually, one difference that you've seen from last season to this season is Finn Sermon was always the right-sided centre-back and Scott Wooden was playing left-sided centre-back. Isaac Hughes is playing left-sided centre-back, even though I think he is right-footed. And Scott Wooden is now the right-sided centre-back, which I actually think probably suits Wooden slightly better. So that might be another aspect there. But Isaac Hughes was the guy where it's like, yeah, but is he ready to be this type of player? And from what we've seen from the first 5 games, yeah, absolutely. Like he's ready to be an A-League starter week in, week out, playing at a very, very high level. And that is why the Phoenix have been able to sustain what they've done so far, defensively at least. And we've seen think we got it in the second half here. We got it in the first half against Central Coast. Like we're starting to see, especially when they play with that back four with a few more options further forward in support of Costa, so he's not completely isolated like he was in the first half against Melbourne Victory, which he still, I agree, I thought best player on the field, Costa Barbarouses. I think he was, even when the job that he was being asked to do was borderline thankless, he did it as well as like the way he was holding the ball up, just dropping into pockets, collecting it, turning on the ball. He's not a guy who's just going to stand there with his back to the defender and shield him away like Chris Wood or someone might. Costa's got to move. He's got to duck and weave if he's going to hold that ball up. And he was doing that stuff fantastically. Remember, he was like battling through an injury at the All Whites camp a week ago as well. It's not like you wouldn't have known it watching him in this game. So he would, an amazing game from him. But when he started to get a bit more support, when you had the wingers around him, you started to see the Phoenix beginning to flex a little bit more attacking poise and creativity and just variability and all these things. Like they look like a team that has like that has more you started to see the pathway to how they're going to grow into becoming a much better attacking team. Like you started to see the direction that they're heading in. And in particular, when you had Marco Rojas out there as well, being able to pull a few strings, even the limited stuff from Rojas in this one, but enough to get a glimpse of it. Paulo Retre has made a massive difference to their midfield as well, as someone who can like link the defense into the attack. He has been brilliant at that, and it's no coincidence that the two games he started have been the Phoenix's two best performances, Central Coast and this one here against Victory. We're getting glimpses of how they're building towards that. But so far, the reason they've had a really good start to the season is because they've been able to sustain what they did defensively last year. And that has a lot to do with how well Isaac Hughes has settled into being a first 11 A-League player.
You can watch that first half on the weekend and be like, yeah, the Wellington Phoenix attack is, let's say it's developing.
And remember, this was without Tim Payne or Sam Sutton, so their two best fullbacks / wingbacks, which, as we've seen already this season, are really essential parts of how they attack, is those guys bombing forward.
But also, it seems to be completely by design. Like, Chiefy just tinkers with the formation, bang, they got a different look. Like, yeah, you start the game this way, seems to be like you're just trying to shut up shop, counter-attack, but then it's not like they play 90 minutes of the same style. So you can't watch the first 30 minutes and be like, wow, the Wellington Phoenix attack sucks. Because A, Chiefy's going to change the formation. And B, especially in that game, suddenly you bring in Marco Rojas off the bench. And everything changes. Like it's a interesting dynamic for the Phoenix, I reckon, because there are games. There have been games, there will be games, when it's the youngsters coming off the bench. But the game we saw on the weekend, it was the youngsters who started, and then they brought a bit of oomph off the bench with Rojas. I think Altai came off the bench, Piper
Stefan Kolikovsky.
Yes, it was Kolikovsky. That's the one who I was thinking of. So you bring in two solid A-League veterans off the bench who are both attacking players. So, as I'm talking through it, I'm like, the Wellington Phoenix, they got so many different looks, so many different formations, so many different combinations. I don't think you can say they're good or bad at, or they're bad at attacking, good at defending, or they only play this way, they're only a counter-attacking team, when Chiefy has shown so many different ways of playing football. And that's just a cool thing to watch for a Kiwi football fan. Like, I don't want to put the Phoenix on a pedestal ahead of Auckland FC or anything like that, because I find so much enjoyment in watching how both teams play football. Even stuff like you were saying about Paulo Retre, watching him and Rufa and how they cover angles when they're working back in defense. Like, if the ball goes wide, your backline sinks into the box, but then your center midfielders, they're working back to the top of the edge of the box to cut off passing angles and set up that defensive structure. Like, you can't just switch off. You can't just lose your players that are bombing forward as well. And for Auckland FC, that's more like, is it Verstrada? That type
Yeah,
of
Louis
dude?
Verstrada does fantastic job of exactly what you're saying
Yeah.
there.
So both teams, yes, we've talked about the goalies. They've got good goalies, good shot stoppers who are obviously good communicators as well. Auckland FC, who's the Fijian Australian guy,
Dan
international.
Hall. Yeah.
Like, he's playing so well now. They're talking about him as an Australian option in the commentary.
Yeah,
Like, they switch him
yeah, they
from,
were.
like, that's pretty good. And you got Nando, as you said. There are good players in defensive positions, but the way both teams defend is what makes them so good defensively, because everyone else is cutting off angles. They're getting into the formation. They know when to put the pressure on. They know when to sit back. And if you just listen to Chiefy, like, Auckland FC don't have their press conferences on YouTube, but you can listen to Chiefy talking football, and, like, I just learn about football listening to him. So the way
Very educating experience when he speaks.
yeah, so it's, yeah, I don't know what more to say. It's just so much fun football. Auckland FC, it seemed like Gillian had a bit more pop returning from All Whites duty.
Confidence after his first All Whites cap, that would make sense. I will add on Chiefy and what you're saying about the Phoenix being able to switch between tactics just in game as well. Like, it's not just a game to game. We've got a week to work on how we're going to approach. Okay, we might change the formation, or we'll change the roles of these players within the formation, work on this over the next 7 days. And then it's like, no, they're able to switch things on the fly. Like, they're able to switch things at halftime, sure, in this game, but they could also do that. Like, it was a different look when Rojas came on in the second half, midway through the second half. Like, and he said this all along. He said he wants versatile players who can play multiple positions. He's going to ask his players to play multiple positions within the same game. Like, different scenarios, you will be expected to do a different role, kind of thing. And this is a lot of what that looks like. And I really, like I was saying about starting to get glimpses of what they're building towards, particularly with the ball attacking, how they're going to score goals. I really feel they're scratching the surface of this from what we've seen so far. Like, this is tip of the iceberg stuff. I think they're going to be ambitious, and I don't think it's always going to work. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be something where the full vision ever becomes viewable or whatever. Viewable vision. I think that works. Keeping the sight metaphor going. But this is what they're building towards. And you always aim for better than what you can achieve, because that's how you push forward, right? That's how you get better than what you are currently right now. So I think I think that's tip of the iceberg stuff from what we've seen in terms of their tactical versatility so far. And a lot of that is just because guys like Rojas, Kolakovsky, Retre have spent Sutton Payne as well currently. Like, they've had a lot of injuries, and they've not really been able to put out their full strength first 11 so far. So I think there's tricks up the sleeve that we haven't even considered yet, I would imagine, because they're just not there yet. It's one step at a time. They're building out this thing, and we've only, like I say, I feel like they've only scratched the surface so far of what they're hoping to achieve, what they're aiming to achieve. Whether they get there or not, there's more to come.
And you saw it, like, with Costa, because he started in a striker position.
For sure.
And then Kolakovsky came on to, like, the left midfielder position, but then Kolakovsky and Costa Barbarossa swapped positions. You had two dudes who seem like they aren't wingbacks. They can do a job.
It's starting wingbacks with Nathan Walker and Oscar Van Hattem, who are both attacking players. So that probably goes to what I was saying about them being... those wingbacks being important attacking roles within the squad, is that he picked two wingers to play wingback rather than two defenders to play wingback, where it's sort of a role where you do both of those things. So I was actually hoping to see Taechuan Loke debut. He was on the bench again. Been really excellent for the reserves for the last 2 years, and he's a fullback who can play on either side, but very much more of a fullback he is a very good attacking fullback, but he's a fullback. He's not a wing back. He's not a winger. You wouldn't really play him. Well, he could play wing back, but you wouldn't play him as a winger. Whereas Van Hadden and Walker, that is their primary position. This was them playing deeper than usual. So yeah, that was very much it felt like maybe a little bit of a tactical compromise. It's like we uh, don't have the main options there, but so we can't pick the all-rounder type guy in that role. So do we pick a batter or a bowler? So they went with batters. They went with the guys who were going to try score some runs / score some goals.
But Walker changed roles during the game.
He did, because in the second half when they changed formation, I think Sheridan was starting at right centre back, and then he becomes just the right back. Van Hadden got subbed off. That's what it was. Van Hadden was subbed off, so they bring on an attacker. But then, Nathan Walker moves up to Sheridan. Actually, I think went to left back. Yeah, that was it. Sheridan goes to left back. Corbin Piper comes on at right back. That's how they did it, with Van Hadden going off, and then Walker moves from left wing back. He moves up to left wing until I think it must have been Kolakowski who replaced him.
Yeah, so all that stuff is happening during the game. It's not like we're going to play football entering this game this way. There's so many different ways of playing football mid-game. Going back to Auckland FC, Gillian hit the pop. I saw like Rogerson's throwing in big efforts. I saw one time where like Rogerson won a tackle kind of on the left side, but in the Auckland FC defensive half. And then it was like a physical contest, and then Gillian got the ball on the left. So those dudes are ripping in. Anything we haven't discussed with Auckland FC that caught your attention aside from Gillian's obvious All Whites mana boost?
Well, I think it's the defensive solidity, but we kind of already mentioned that. I talked about how good Nando Painika is playing, and do I have it here somewhere? Painika is second in the A-League for clearances per 90 minutes, 9.8 clearances per 90 minutes. He is third in the A-League for shots blocked per 90 minutes with 1.8. That is those are inflated numbers at the start of the season. It's not just that you'd expect that to change. I think even Steve Corica would very much hope that to change, because you don't want to have to be doing that much defending. For context, Finn Sermon last season led the league in clearances per 90, and that was with 5.8 per 90 minutes, which is considerably less than 9.8 that Painika is doing so far. But that tells you. And also, Finn Sermon was second in blocks per game, which I think is very much, that stacks up for Finn Sermon, right? You just think of him defending for that Phoenix team, of him just like hurling his body in front of shots and trying to block stuff. So Peinika's doing what Finn Sermon did last year, in effect, for Auckland FC. Like, he's playing like that, and Dan Hall's been awesome alongside him. Dan Hall was, I already said this, but Dan Hall was fantastic in the game against MacArthur. The defense is what won them. We mentioned Louis Verstrada and how well he's playing in what I think internationally is known as the Alex Rufer role. At this point, Verstrada's coming in and he's doing those things. Guillermo Mai getting a goal set up by Felipe Gallegos as well. So a couple of the imports combining an attack, which is something we hadn't necessarily seen maybe enough of to this point. They also feel very much like a work in progress in attack, but a little bit of a different way, because whereas we're getting glimpses of what the Phoenix are building towards, Auckland FC is starting from scratch. Phoenix are in the second year with a head coach where they've got all of the information they had, all the experience they had last season, and they're building on top of that and evolving things and trying to come up with a few different ideas. But Auckland FC are starting from scratch, have built a fantastic defensive platform, but I don't think they have the same scope to become an amazing attacking team unless it's out of individual brilliance, which maybe it will be. Like, maybe Guillermo Mai's got that first goal now, just going to start banging them in all the time. Who knows? But I don't think they're necessarily built tactically to be that type, like to do anything special in attack. But like the Wellington Phoenix last year, you don't have to be. If you're keeping clean sheets most games and scoring a goal per game, well, you keep winning games, as Auckland FC have proven to this point.
Also, shout out Cam Howison. I'm always impressed with Cam Howison stepping up from Auckland City FC, stepping up from National League football to just be part of the engine room with Auckland FC. And we've talked about it playing more attacking midfielder, more defensive midfielder. Like he just does everything in the midfield for Auckland FC as a homegrown talent. Quickly
Little
here,
cameo as well for my boy Louis Toomey.
Oh, Louis
Second
Toomey came
appearance
on.
in the A-League. That's always good.
He just always finds like I've seen 2 games from him now and he just bears forward both games.
He's a slippery one as well. Like he seems like he's hard to tackle. He's a scrapper too. So um he's from Napier originally. He definitely played for Hawke's Bay before he moved to the Wellington Phoenix Academy. So he's got a bit of that ruggedness about how he plays, even though he is someone who is quick. He likes to dribble, he likes to take on defenders, but also they stick a foot and try to take the ball away. He's sticking a foot right back in, trying to stop them from doing that. Like he'll fight through the tackles as well as trying to skip past them. So, yeah, good stuff from Louis Toomey. And we haven't even seen him shooting yet. His shooting is excellent. He will just take a pop from wherever, and he hits the ball very well.
Wellington Phoenix women had a win. Am I correct in my observation that Maya McCutcheon she seemed to play a more prominent role for the Wellington Phoenix women's team? Because I'd seen it being played I think she had a game at centre back recently. It seemed a bit more defensive, whereas this game she was further up the field, getting more touches, more involved, and to be honest, they won, so it worked.
Yeah, she was she was allowed to play the midfield role that she was brought to play, basically, in this game, because just the way the setup was, they've struggled with injuries at the back, and also the first half of the first game was so shocking that that was the first time she had to drop back and sit in center defense as well to sort things out there. Not ideal, but I will say, apart from that, like they conceded 4 goals in the first half of the first game of the season, right? Since then, they've conceded 2 goals in 3.5 games. So the defensive import is still to arrive, who hopefully might be ready for some part of the next game, but we'll see how that goes. That's Olivia Kelly, coming over from America. Went to the same school as Isabel Cox, by the way. I don't think they would have overlapped because she only did a grad year there. She went to a different school for her main degree, but that was NC State, it was the same school that Katie Bowen once went to. And listening to a podcast this morning, I think it might also have been the same school that Michael Jordan went to. So if you're going to the school that Michael Jordan went to, I think you'll find out about it. So Katie Bowen would know. Someone can ask her. Yeah, Maya McCutcheon, though, here was actually able to play in the midfield properly. Like proper midfield in a game where the Phoenix were competitive and keeping some possession. And a lot of the reason they were keeping possession is because she kept winning it for them. She just made tackle after tackle after tackle, which she's shown from the start, but she's got that ability. Like she can scrap too. She can win those contested balls. She reads the play very well, gets a few interceptions on top of that. She also scored a goal in this game, which is immensely important because that's their first goal from open play that wasn't an own goal. They got an own goal and a penalty in the first game, blanked 2 games in a row, and then she got this one here. Set up by Olivia Ferguson, who kind of should have just scored it herself, but shanked it a little bit, but sweet as, take it how it comes. Olivia Ferguson also, very feisty striker. I think that's quite important. You're seeing a bit of mongrel about how she plays. Like she's not just turning up as an import to try to score some goals, hanging on the end of moves. She's out there trying to win the ball back and really make things happen, chasing down lost causes and these kind of things, which I think the Phoenix need a bit of that because they are quite a tactical team. They try to think like a process-driven team, and sometimes you need to balance that out with some of that feistiness. So to see them getting that from the imports is great. And I toyed with the idea in the newsletter. It's too early to say, but I'm kind of wondering if this might end up being a better import haul than they had last season. I'm leaning towards it will be, but we'll have to see what Kelly does when she arrives as well, because we haven't even seen all the imports yet, but we're getting there. Yeah, Maya McCutcheon, best player on the pitch in that game. Like the defensive work in midfield and also popping up with a goal and some decent passing stuff. Like she's got a bit more about her technically than she'd shown in previous games, mostly just because she hadn't had a chance to show it in previous games. And that was a massive victory. Like you said at the start of the football chat, probably the biggest win of those three. The most needed, and also I would argue the best performance, I think, to build into what they did. McCutcheon probably helped by having Daisy Brazendale starting alongside her as well. So they had two sort of defensive-minded midfielders. It gave them a little bit more balance there, largely because Anneli Longo was out injured because she got her face smashed in the previous game, and she was there on the sideline with bruises like all the way down half of her face. Where there's a little team photo with the fans afterwards, and Ali Longo's standing there with Grace Jale, who also got a blood nose from the game, so she has like a tissue stuck up her nose, and Longo's got half her face like, squashed, and those two getting stuck in the wars. But Jale actually played off the bench in this game, which I thought was an interesting adjustment as well. There were quite a few changes out there from Paul Temple in this game, but the changes worked. They got a victory. Like I said, they're actually turning out to be quite a decent defensive team. They're not a decent attacking team. They're not creating, well, they're creating some chances, but they're not necessarily creating high caliber enough chances. And they're certainly not taking enough of those chances. Like the shooting just hasn't been good enough to convert half chances, which is absolutely what they need to build towards. Like that's the work on for them. But like, Liam Gillian turning up after All West camp with a bit of pop, that's confidence, right? That's someone who's been vindicated in his career. He's had an international cap. He's had a great experience. Just spent a week training with Chris Wood. He's feeling on top of the world. He's coming in and bringing that back to his club. Confidence also comes when you've lost 3 games in a row. You're feeling a little bit wobbly. You're not quite sure what direction the team's going in. Then you get a grinding, gritty victory. Away from home as well. It wasn't necessarily an away game because of Unite round stuff, but it was a neutral ground game. It was a game in Australia, which is, you remember last season, something they had horrific trouble trying to get results from those games. They kept losing by single goal margins in those away games. Well, here they won by a single goal margin. So confidence is going to stem from that as well. And we'll see where they can build from this platform now moving forward with the confidence of a victory. They got 3 points on the board.
Rightio, just quickly, a bit of rugby league, although there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stuff that I have to find confirmation before I really go deep into Kiwi-NRL squad building. But a couple of notes have come through over recent days that I do want to touch on. I've seen Moala Graham-Telfer training with the Warriors, so he's obviously in the mix there. Also got a lot of Patrick Moi snaps for the Warriors. He was out injured for a lot of last season, coming out of De La Salle College as a very powerful center outside back. So watch out for Patrick Moi coming through the Warriors, and it was good to see Moala Graham-Telfer still in the mix there with the Warriors. We've had Te Hurinui Twidle, otherwise known as Appa to some Australians. He is training with the Eels NRL squad again, because he did spend time training with the Eels last season. He is, as I said, a Turanga Waiwai Jr. who played fullback and number 6 for the Eels in Jersey Flegg. He has come through the Eels system. I think he spent a bit of time in southeast Queensland after leaving Aotearoa, and now he's in the Eels, and his progression smells a lot like Dylan Brown. So watch out for Te Hurinui Twidle. Mainly a fullback, but he can play number 6. Did play a few games in number 6 for the Eels in Jersey Flegg this year. I expect him to step up to New South Wales Cup next season. And we've also got confirmation that Sosaia Alatini has been, I think he's on the Bulldogs development supplementary contract list. He's a youngster from Christchurch, from Hornby, and he was an exceptional back rower, edge forward for the Bulldogs in SG Ball this year. So he's an SG baller, now on the cusp of the NRL squad for the Bulldogs. So watch out for Sosaia Alatini. And there's also been a bit of buzz about Cassius Tia, halfback coming through the Bulldogs system. He's a Maris Junior in Auckland, who went to Mount Albert Grammar, and then he moved to Australia. Initially, I think it was with the Roosters, and then he switched over to the Bulldogs. And the Bulldogs have a lot of halves. Apparently, they've got a halves academy. But they've also got Cassius Tia from Auckland, and then you've also got Bronson Rubin, who is from Christchurch. He's a Northern Bulldogs Kaya Poi Junior. So lots of bits and pieces floating around about NRL squads, and I will try my best to compile all that stuff together at some point with the Warriors, and then also a Kiwi-NRL focus on who is in the mix for NRL clubs across the landscape. But we need to finish there. That's today's Niche Cast. Big up yourself. Make yourself heard, make yourself known on all the platforms, and enjoy the Aotearoa sport. Big up. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. And chit